And we live very much in a society where money is a financial exchange and it is a necessity. And that has been another challenge for me in doing this work of how do you let that become a layer that you can shed when it feels as though it is around you at every corner. And I think also for me as a very privileged individual who has been gifted a extremely privileged life by my parents, and in my childhood do not experience this even to the same extent that a lot of individuals do. Like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There are certain things that must take priority. How do we lean into this work with that in mind? How do we allow because I have conversations like this and I'm like, I don't even want to think about how I'm going to pay for the grocery store because that feels so...
It does, doesn't it? Yes.
Right? And yet we must. And I know that that's also a big part of your work in kind of the economic rebel, right? In
Renegade economist.
Yes, that's what it is. That's the
Kate
language.
Raworth.
That's the language.
I stole that totally from Kate Raworth, who wrote Donut Economics. But yes.
Beautiful thing to steal. Yes, I would love to hear thoughts.
Yeah. So, and this brings us back to also Ursula Le Guin, who said, we live in capitalism. Its power seems unassailable. And yet, so did the divine right of kings. Capitalism is the manifestation of the trauma culture. It's devastatingly destructive. And the fact that people still support it, in spite of the fact that it's got us to the edge of extinction, is, I find, really terrifying. I can't remember who it was. Stuart, I think, who said, it's easier to imagine the total extinction of all life on Earth than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And he's right for so many people, because it's so embedded in every part of our lives. And I've been reading it again with Vanessa Andreotti, who's really wrestling with this, and Nora Bateson, Gregory Bateson's daughter, who does all the warm data work. And how do we step out of something that is so intrinsic? I have one of the people that I met at Schumacher, a wonderful young man, and he's written a book now, but he's written the book of the fact that he stepped off the top of a multi-story building because he did not want to be part of this anymore. And he didn't die, but he lost both of his legs from the knee down and crushed a lot of other parts. And now he's got to the point where he started off not wanting to live in this world, and now he's got to not wanting to live in this world. And what can he do to change it? And because my default, I could go and live in a straw bale hut in the west edge of Wales and basically be totally off-grid, and nothing would change. I could do what Charlie did and take myself out of the equation, and nothing would change. And so I think where I am at the moment, this is, it's a work in progress. I am very much anchored with Joanna Macy's 3 pillars of the Great Turning. 3 is a great number. So she had holding actions, systems change, and shifting consciousness. And when I discovered this at college, it was one of the first things we did. They said, okay, there's these 3. Put yourself in the room where you think you are. Here's the one, there's holding actions over here, here's systemic change, and here's shifting consciousness. Where are you? And I stood right in the middle. And we did it again pretty much the last day at college, and I was still right in the middle. And it wasn't a conscious thing, it's this is my place. And other people are in other places. And there are other people who will lie down in front of the bulldozers that are going to frack, and that's not mine to do. I've done a few XR things, and sitting, the most likely that I was going to be arrested was outside the BBC, and I was terrified. And all of me, I was brought up, the policemen were nice people, and I know they're not, or some of them are not, but it was a really weird experience, and it felt really important, and I wasn't arrested. But I have friends who've been to jail now, and the whole system is so inherently violent. We're back to Hobbes' definition of a nation state as being that political entity that has a monopoly, claims a legal monopoly of violence within its set geographic boundaries. And the violence of the state is getting greater. That's why I wrote what I wrote in Any Human. And yet, so there's the holding actions, there's the systems, how we need total systemic change, how do we achieve it? And at the root, there is the shifting consciousness that gives us the value base on which we can predicate systems change. And your question, the practical question is, what do we do in the meantime? What I do, I think everybody, again, comes to this differently, is minimize my engagement with capitalism. But I'm talking to you on a computer that costs thousands, over an internet that costs thousands to keep going. And yet, if I wasn't, what difference could I make in the world? So every action, I think being conscious of every action, checking in with the web of, does my body feel okay with this? And there's, I don't know, I need a new pair of slippers. No, I'm just going to go down to the charity shop and find some. That didn't feel right. Or learning that, using the real subtle indications of what feels okay, and is it that it feels okay because it is okay, or does it feel okay because a part of me wants the dopamine hit of, I don't know, having a computer with a big screen? And then there's also a sense of, one of the things that money is such a weird thing, because indigenous cultures do not have this, and they didn't barter. The whole concept that money arose out of barter is wrong. Barter arises in places where there used to be money and there is none, like prisons. Barter is not a thing. There's a brilliant book, if anyone's interested, called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber, who is now dead, sadly, and David Wengrow. It took them 10 years to write, and it's completely reframed my concept of who we are as humanity. And one of the things they look at is the social technologies that exist within whole, healed initiation cultures, indigenous cultures, that exist to facilitate the flows of value that we have replaced with money. Money inherently arises out of violence. You cannot have money unless it is imposed by violence. If I turn up, so the islands of Britain, there is no money. It's a completely flowing culture. There's a lot of trade going on. We send flint hand axes from Norfolk to southern Spain. There's lots of, but there is no money. And then somebody turns up and goes, see this little bit of silver with somebody's face stamped on it that you've never seen? It's worth 2 of your kids. You go, I beg your pardon, what? You go, I've got plenty of silver. Look, I've got gold. And they go, no, that's worth nothing. This silver, see this silver? I've got 10 guys out there with swords who will kill you and enslave your children if you argue with me. This money is worth something. And not only that, I'm going to give it to you. Yeah. Why would I do that? Because then I'm going to take it back as tax. And you can only pay tax in those little silver things with faces on. So you need to find some more by this time next year. Like, what? What? And if you don't, I'm going to kill you and enslave your children. So it's, and that's making it flippant, but actually money is predicated on violence. It does not exist until or unless you have people who need to pay other people to commit acts of violence in order that they can take value from the people who have created it.
Well, and one of the most powerful things that's come up for me in the course of our conversation is thinking about, truly, if I am heart explodingly in love with being alive and every entity around me, I am not going to ask you for money to do anything. It is a joy and a privilege to connect, to cook, to host, to invite you
to
into
do
my
what
home.
you are good at, knowing that I will do what I'm good at, and we share it for the good of the community.
Yes.
And yet, in the current culture, if you don't engage at some point with somebody giving you some money, then you're going to end up under a bridge somewhere. And that's been very carefully set up such that that's the case, because it frightens people into continuing to stay in the system. So I think, for me, you stay in the system, accept money from the people who want to give it, and flow it out again. Make sure that it flows. One of the things that you learn when you learn a bit about how money functions is that the velocity of money, which is, I give it to you, you give it to the person who cuts your hair, gives it to the person who walks their dog, who gives it to the person who, I don't know, makes her shoes. It goes in circles, and eventually it flows back out of the system as tax. I think one of the things we need to really, what blew my brain early on doing economics was the understanding that banks lend money into existence, governments spend money into existence, and they take it back as tax to even out the money supply. And if the government decides to create less money out of nothing, then either the money supply shrinks, in which case you have massive deflation, or the banks have to lend more to private people in order to maintain the money supply. And the banks are making money out of nothing and selling it to us at a profit. And Henry Ford, who was fundamentally a white supremacist, said a very long time ago that if ordinary people understood how money was created, there would be a revolution tomorrow. And the whole narrative of, oh no, it's our tax dollars. No. As soon as you take money out as tax, you destroy that money. It ceases to exist. It's not going into a vault somewhere and being recycled. The government spends money into existence that did not exist before. And so we have money it's partly a way of exchanging value, it's a way of storing value, and it's a way of accounting for value. And all we have to do, people listening, is to create another way of exchanging, storing, and accounting for value that isn't dollars. And then the people who have a lot of dollars have got, it used to be bunches of bits of paper that are worth nothing, and now it's zeros in a bank on a screen that are worth nothing. And it's not hard to imagine other ways of creating, storing, and accounting for value that are much, much more equitable than the capital system we have just now, and not a single one of them involves capital growth. And so that's the commodification of land, labor, and capital is the foundation of capitalism. That's Polanyi. That's years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like, I think the thing that really, really struck me, and why obviously in retrospect I had to go and do a master's in economics, was first of all to understand the extent to which we're being lied to.
Right.
sometimes by people who know, and quite a lot of the time. There was a group called God, I can't remember, one of the greenish leftish think tanks in the UK who went to the British Parliament in 2014, I think, and discovered that only 10% of the members of Parliament understood where money came from. And the rest
People,
believe what they've been told, because it's
right.
not actually their job to explore, are we being lied to comprehensively by the system? Their job is
Wow.
to shake babies' hands and tell enough lies to get elected, so that
Right.
the people who really control the power can tell them what to do.